On October 22nd, 1908, Helen agreed for a reporter from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch to come interview Hannigan. By then, an article by Issi had appeared in the Journal of the Society of Psychic Research, and everyone around was talking about the shy young man, while the reporter was very unconvinced about him having these psychic abilities and just really didn't care for him. The reporter called Hannigan's arrival to the interview to be that of a debutante, and throughout the interview, he was acting very weird. After being introduced to the reporter, it was said that he picked up a book and began to chew on the corner of it while staring at him in such an odd way before actually speaking to him. I've not been seeking notoriety in any way, and I'm sorry that this publicity has come about. As for myself, I've not much to say. Dr. Issi has said it all. Hannigan took a copy of the Psychic Society's report and read aloud his own biography, noting that he had been raised in North St. Louis, near the water tower, and lived there all his life. He then claimed to have known nothing of anything in a spiritual way, and no more that the reporter did on how they happened. Even when doing the automatic writing, he knows nothing of what is being written and that it just happens, knowing not how they even come about. The reporter asked about the roses during the Dryer's seance, only for Will to reply, "Of course, I know nothing about roses or what I wrote. I don't know anything about these things and what happens," and admitting to never having these abilities as a child, as well as knowing nothing about the spirit world or anything else that the reporter asked him. "I don't pretend to know anything," Hannigan told the reporter while smiling with merriment. When Will left the room, Helen was embarrassed and apologized to the reporter, trying to excuse his behavior, saying that he was a mere boy and ill-mannered, stating that he doesn't drink or smoke and has never had a love affair. Helen said that he is an extraordinary young man, having only lived in one parish of St. Louis his whole life, and that he lost his mother, who had died 3 years ago. She was a strong woman, and that he was the baby of his family. That was all Helen knew about him, and the reporter was still left unimpressed. At the end of the article, the reporter noted that Hannigan was said to have graduated from St. John's Hospital Training School. At the school, it was said that he worked at the hospital as a nurse for 5 years before his graduation, but that would have been before the hospital was even established, so it sounded rather suspicious. The reporter was the first to ever start questioning Will Hannigan and his wonderful psychic feats, and he would not be the last. However, the people who had read the stories of Hannigan were very pleased to hear that he was just as weird as they had hoped. Before anything else appeared in the newspapers about turning on him or questioning him, Will Hannigan had gone missing. 2 days later, the headline in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch read, "Hannigan has disappeared from the Lambert's home." And with all this in the wake of the report from the American Society of Psychic Research, as well as the interview, the phone was ringing off the hook at the Lamberts, because it seemed that everyone wanted a piece of Will Hannigan. He was invited to seances, to find lost objects, and to even predict fortunes. All this overwhelmed him as well as the Lamberts, to the point that one day a maid would have to tell a reporter who came inquiring about him that he was in the house, but she could not allow him to enter. That they could not talk to him without the consent of Helen and Jordan Lambert. Then she went inside for a few moments before coming back out, having completely changed her mind, and said that he had actually gone. having no idea where he was and being told by Mr. Lambert to relay to the reporter that the family had nothing else to say about the clairvoyant and his work, calling it now the Hannigan incident, and that it was closed. The first sit-down interview that Will Hannigan had would be the only time that he would talk to the press. He continued to keep to himself, and the Lamberts turned their seances into more private affairs with close friends, trying to save themselves from further embarrassment. Now, the readers of local newspapers can only speculate about the seances that took place at the home of St. Louis's richest spiritualists. But there was some backlash. The newspapers who once admired and praised the psychic feats of the young Will Hannigan, that were based off Helen's accounts, not from anything that they had actually witnessed, had started to express their doubts, turning on Hannigan, stating that his abilities were just simple stunts and basically smoke and mirrors. They even mentioned that he suspiciously refused to show off his powers until he was in the friendly seclusion of the Lambert home and never in the presence of strangers. Pretty soon, the reporters, since they couldn't get to Will, started to search for his family to see what they thought about him. They found his brother-in-law, who was a butcher, and he had said that he never took Will's tricks as anything, and that he had only started doing spiritualist tricks last March, and that they used to joke with him about it. Now, John Hannigan, who was a city detective and Will's older brother, stated that he knew nothing of his brother's abilities and that he hadn't seen him in a year, having no idea where he was living until seeing what was being said in the papers with the Lamberts. After the questions, he had requested to be left out, and he had better things to do than to talk about psychic stuff. Jordan Lambert was the most embarrassed when the newspaper articles began to say that him and his wife were duped by Will Hannigan, calling him a fraud and that they were fools. In an interview, he went on to say that he would walk down the street and his colleagues, whom he had known for years, would either ignore him or call him insane for having such things written about his family. He was disgusted by the sheer amount of phone calls and letters he had received from charlatans, and he wanted it all to stop. Helen, of course, wasn't ready to believe that Hannigan was a fake. She still had high hopes that he truly had these abilities, and this is where the wedge between her and Jordan began to form. Things had gotten so bad between them that they had separated in the summer of 1911. Helen moving to New York and Jordan went to Europe. Helen's mother told the newspapers that the separation had all been because of Will Hannigan and him being fired by Jordan Lambert. The mother went on to say that Hannigan seemed to have a strange grip on the family, especially her daughter Helen, who was having a difficult time after having her second child in 1905 and seemed to dive into psychic research as a distraction. It was Jordan's soon objection to her infatuation with Hannigan that caused the split. He had lost all faith and trust in the medium, and angry with Helen because she refused to give up her interest in spiritualism. Eventually, the separation, where Jordan had high hopes would not be permanent, turned into a divorce, and they both went on with their lives. Jordan continued on playing billiards and running the company with his family, moving into a new home, the luxurious Oxford Apartments, and in 1915, Jordan continued on playing billiards and running the company with his family, moving into a new home, the luxurious Oxford Apartments, and in 1915 had unexpectedly remarried. His new wife was Beatrice Kendall, who was from Webster Groves. They had married in New York with her... His new wife was Beatrice Kendall, who was from Webster Groves. They had married in New York with only her mother and sister as witnesses. But bad luck for Jordan strikes again in 1917 when he and Beatrice separated, soon talking about divorce. Now, here's some more info about Jordan. According to his brother Albert, he was not a well man and had rather bad nerves.